Hello, everybody. Welcome to week 4 in Legal Studies 457, 557, Business Law for Accountants here in the spring of 2024 at the UAB Collat School of Business. All of you have by now taken the first exam, and I will be publishing the results of that first exam shortly if I have not done that already. Here are the results of the extra credit opportunity for week 3. The Federal Trade Commission is scheduled to announce its rule on non-competition agreements during the month of April 2024. This is a very big deal. Non-compete agreements are very common in American business today. There are a number of learning activities in the second learning module that I encourage you to look at. They will be tested on in the second exam. For example, a very, very interesting story about a non-compete agreement for a hairstylist, but April 2024 was the right answer. Here are the learning activities for the second learning modules. We'll be looking this week at the topic of sale and leases of goods and the law of banking. There are 2 sets of class slides, as you can see here, one for chapters 19 through 21 and one for chapter 24. The Uniform Commercial Code came about in the years after World War II, when the legal profession got together and said that it was way too complicated for the 50 different states, or however many there were at the time, to each have a different set of rules for how to handle the increasing number of transactions in the sale of goods. So Uniform Commercial Code Article 2 was written, and all 50 states have adopted it to one extent or another. So there is today a great deal of uniformity that once wasn't there. But remember this graphic when we're talking about the sale of goods or the leasing of goods, such as the leasing of a car. We go to the Uniform Commercial Code, either Article 2 for goods or for the sale of goods, or Article 2A for the leasing of goods. The rules are basically the same but lighter for the sale and leasing of goods. This checklist still works. There has to be an agreement, an offer, and acceptance. There has to be legally valid consideration. Each side has to have capacity. The contract has to be legal, and there can't be any valid defenses that one side or the other could argue successfully. Here is a summary. I encourage you to stop, look at this, find it in the textbook, and see that the basic differences are that the law of the sale of goods is easier than the law of the sale of services and real estate. For example, look at that top one. Under the common law of contracts, all material terms had to be covered. There couldn't be any open terms. Open terms are acceptable under the Uniform Commercial Code for sales of goods. Here is your first or your next extra credit opportunity, this time for week 4 by Sunday night, April 7 at 11:59. Tell me what well-known company got in trouble for calling something or calling some things sales that really were not sales under the definition of the Uniform Commercial Code, and that definition of sale had great meaning in their financial statements. So just send me a Canvas mail message with the name of that company. Chapter 20 covers the important topic of who bears the risk of loss as goods get shipped around. It used to be that it depended on the concept of title. It does not today depend on that. Today, the Uniform Commercial Code has replaced that with the concept of identifying goods to a contract. And you'll be looking in the textbook and in the PowerPoint slides at the words FOB, free on board, and that means free on board until a destination is reached. So in this particular example, if the contract specified that the goods were FOB buyer's loading dock, that means that the correct answer is C, because up until the goods reach the buyer's loading dock, the other side, the seller, bears the risk of loss if they are damaged or lost or otherwise impaired. I did a short video at the Regions Operations Center loading dock. That building has since been sold. Chapter 21 covers a feature of the Uniform Commercial Code for the sale of goods, and that is implied warranties. The UCC implies certain promises in the sale of goods, such as that the goods are merchantable. That means that they are fit for the ordinary purpose for which they are sold. Contracts for the sale of goods can be breached, just as contracts for the sale of services and real estate. Chapter 22 covers what the remedies are when that happens, and as you'll see, it often depends upon where the goods are when the breach occurs. Moving to Chapter 24, Banking Law. All of you have seen a check, although I think fewer and fewer of you actually have checks, but at least for a while we're going to be covering the concept of checks in this course. Here are some key terms. Who's the drawer? That's you, if this is your checking account. Who's the drawee? The bank. And who's the payee? That's the person you wrote the check to. Those numbers are very important. You often, if you're going to have electronic transactions with your checking account, you have to know both the routing number and the checking account number. Here's the process among those various parties that we'll be looking at. And then finally, Chapter 25, we'll be looking at the topic of bankruptcy, security interests and bankruptcy. Here is a cartoon that illustrates the concept of collateral. That is, what is it? Collateral is something that makes the lender in a lending transaction feel more secure. This happens to have been drawn by a classmate of mine in high school, and we had our class reunion just about 18 months ago. Secured transactions are transactions that have some security added to them. It's more than just the words on a piece of paper. There's something more than that, and that whatever that is set forth in a security agreement, or can happen by operation of law. We'll be talking about these operation of law security interests that get created, such as a mechanic's lien. Sometimes you can get a third party to step in, either as a guarantor or a surety, and the difference between those two relationships will definitely be on the second exam. And then moving finally to bankruptcy. Chapter 7 is liquidation. You're going out of business, never to be seen again, although sometimes, such as with Bed Bath & Beyond, you might go out of business, but you might sell your name to somebody else, and somebody else is going to use your name. The bankruptcy system has been the subject of some legislation in the last 20 years or so. About 20 years ago, a Republican-dominated Congress, Republican-controlled Congress, decided that the bankruptcy laws were being abused, and they added something called a needs test, which you can see here. There is a presumption that if you make more than a certain amount of money and then try to file for bankruptcy, you are abusing the bankruptcy system. It does not mean that you can't successfully then go through the bankruptcy process, but it will be harder for you to do that. Sometimes, either through bankruptcy or otherwise, just through agreement, you can get a debt discharged, but sometimes that is just not possible. For example, the Internal Revenue Service does not discharge debts using the normal rules. Student loans are also extremely hard to discharge, but President Biden has tried to soften that, and he has proposed a policy that attempts to make it somewhat easier to have student loans discharged. November of 2022, he proposed the rule that you see here that should make it easier to get your student loans discharged. Chapter 11 is when you stay in business and still go through the bankruptcy process. Your textbook publisher filed for bankruptcy and stayed in business, obviously. 2013, Delta Airlines also did that. Finally, here is our calendar. Today is Monday, the 1st of April, and it is not an April Fool's joke that on Saturday, March 30th, the University of Alabama's basketball team advanced to the Final Four. At the time I'm recording this on Sunday the 31st, I don't know if my own alma mater, Duke University, will beat North Carolina State to get into that Final Four. I don't know who I'll root for if those two teams come up against each other. But as you can see, the next assignment are the CPA client consultation simulations on Wednesday the 10th. And then we have our second learning exam that will close on Sunday the 14th of April.